Good afternoon from the Ruby Room at Cornell Public Library. I'm Miss Jennifer, and for today's Tinker Tuesday, we're going to learn about the science behind homemade butter. So as always, I'm going to go over your materials first. So you need, the most important ingredient here is this heavy whipping cream. So you want heavy whipping cream and not just whipping cream. The difference is the fat content. So this right here is heavy whipping cream. You're going to need a container to make your butter in. Right here I've got a recycled peanut butter jar. The nice thing about the glass jars is that you can really see what's going on because they're nice and clear, but of course that's optional. If you'd rather use a Tupperware, as long as it's nice and sealed, you can use that if you're not comfortable using the glass. But the glass, because of how super clear it is, I recommend, because you can really see the what's happening inside. So some optional things. So when we make our butter, we're going to have a byproduct of buttermilk. If you want to keep your buttermilk, I recommend you use a strainer. If not, then we'll just rinse it out. You'll want a bowl so we can put what ends up here into the bowl so we can get rid of that buttermilk. And the other thing that's optional is to add salt. If you're used to salted butter, the butter, of course, will taste very different because it's not salted. So that is an optional thing if you would like to add like a little pinch, and I will go over at what point to add salt if you would like to do so. So it's really up to taste. You always can wait to the very end and not add any salt, and then you can divide it, mix it in. But yes, you can also add it during the process, so it's really throughout and well mixed, but we won't add very much, but that is optional. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to put aside our things, get our heavy whipping cream in our jar. First, before we'll talk about the science behind this experiment and the process of making butter at the very, very end. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about milk. So milk is comprised of 5 main components. You've got water, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. In this case of milk, the carbohydrates are lactose. So, and then there are lesser components that aren't very much, which would be your vitamins and your minerals. So that's what's in your regular milk. So the proteins in milk are divided into 2 different groups. There's caseins, and then there's whey proteins. And they are often extracted from milk to used for nutritional applications, such as in infant formula and like protein powders. So if you ever seen whey protein powder in the store, it's been extracted from milk. So the fat in milk is known as butter fat, and it is predominantly used in the manufacturing of creams, margarine, butter, which we're going to be making today, and creams. So the final main component of milk, of course, is lactose. Lactose is approximately 20% of the sweetness of table sugar or sucrose. So those are the main components of your butter. You got so I'm going to go over that again. So you've got water, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So what is butter? Butter, as also the fat, butter fat, is basically made from milk that has a high fat content. So our heavy whipping cream has a much higher fat content than even whole milk. So when you go to the store, you know, you've got your different percentages. You got your 1%, your 2%, your low fat. This has a lot of fat. So that's what it is. We're gonna make 2 things with this. When we start shaking our heavy whipping cream, eventually we're gonna get butter, but there's also gonna be another liquid in the jar, and that's buttermilk. And of course, at the halfway point, before it turns completely into butter, what we're going to get is whipped cream. Now, normally whipped cream has sugar added, so you can always give it a taste at the halfway point if you want. If you've added salt, it's going to taste salty. If you wait, so I recommend usually at that point we'll add salt if you want to taste the whipping cream, but even at that point, it's not going to taste how you think of whipped cream because we add sugar to that. But you can always scoop out a little bit, add a little sugar, and taste it if you want to see what that tastes like. So, glass jar. There's no fine out measurement. What you want to do is you want to fill whatever container you use halfway. And of course, the more you put in here, the more butter and buttermilk you're going to make. So that's totally up to you how much you make. Keep in mind before you make that decision that this does not keep very long in the refrigerator. You only have about 2 to 3 days max in the refrigerator to use up your butter. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my heavy whipping cream. And I'm going to fill up my container halfway, leaving plenty of room for it to shake and do its thing. Set that aside. So what we're going to do is we're going to shake, and you want to have that lid jar on tight because you do not want to be slinging heavy whipping cream everywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to shake for 5 minutes, check on it. It should be at the 5-minute point, it should be close to whipped cream. And then we'll go for another 5 and check on it. Getting to butter can be anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes. So that also depends on how hard you shake it. If kids get tired, you can always have them switch out if you've got multiple kids with you, or parents and caregivers can step in and give a little hand, give those little hands a break. But the next thing we're gonna do, and very easy, just simple shaking. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera for 5 minutes and then check back in and see where we're at. All right, welcome back. So at this point, I did cut a little bit earlier than 5. Your shaking times will vary based on your strength and how hard you shake. So I definitely have whipping cream. I can tell because of how it's not really moving around quickly anymore, and it sounds heavy in the jar. I can still hear it shaking, but I can tell I'm at the whipping cream portion. So it's a little bit harder, and it sounds heavier, and it feels heavier. So I'm gonna take a look at this point. So yeah, I've got lovely, lovely whipped cream. Here's what my jar looks like. So at this point, you could take a little bit out and add a little bit of sugar, because remember, whipped cream, we add sugar to it, so this doesn't have any sugar added other than the natural sugar that's already in milk, because I said one of the components is lactose, which is a form of sugar. So won't be super sweet like you're used to when you think of whipped cream. So you could always add a little bit more and taste it at this point. Or you can keep going to make our butter. If you want salted butter, I recommend at this point adding like a pinch or two to our whipped cream. And yeah, once you get to that point, you can add your little bit of salt. Don't add too much. You can always add more at the very, very end, but this way it's nice and mixed. But that is, of course, optional. All right, so check in when you start hearing and seeing that you have a big ball of what looks like butter and liquid. We're on the right track. So the next step in the next 5 minutes or so should be butter. So we'll check back in with that. Okay, so I definitely have my 2 products. I've got my liquid buttermilk. So your whipping cream should have gotten firmer and firmer, and then it should have started sloshing around in sort of like a gloop. And then you should have heard more liquid start coming out. So that's where I'm at. You can definitely hear the liquid, but inside the liquid is my little ball of butter. So hopefully we can see it pretty good. But you can see I've got chunks of butter, and then that liquid you've got there, that's your buttermilk. So of course you can strain your buttermilk. We're gonna have to separate either way. So you can keep it and you could make like buttermilk pancakes or buttermilk biscuits or something along those lines. I'm not saving it, so what I'm going to actually be doing is I'm going to be rinsing it out in cold water. So that's the next step, is that we're going to be, of course if you're saving buttermilk, you'll strain and keep it. I am going to be rinsing it out with cold water, and then you just have to knead it and to get it into that ball shape, and then we'll have our butter. So we're going to do that last step next, and then we will talk about the science behind this and what's going on. All right, stay tuned for that. Okay, so we're ready for the next part. I've got my clean bowl and cold water. What we're going to do is we're going to dump out our contents. Here's another close-up view. All right, so you can totally touch, as long as you've washed your hands, your butter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a spoon. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the buttermilk, and then we're just going to get cold water. Make sure it's cold first. And then you're going to start rinsing out that buttermilk. And the butter needs to also be kneaded a bit. So I'm going to transfer my butter to a little shallow dish. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator because it needs to get cold, and then I'll rinse it off some more and we'll knead it some more until it's a nice butter texture, but we're pretty close. So here's my lovely bit of butter. I'm going to chill it and we'll knead it some more and see if we need to rinse it off some more. So we'll check back in a minute. So my butter has firmed up quite a bit after being in the refrigerator for a couple minutes. So I don't think that I need to do anything else. So we're going to check back in and we'll talk about the science behind our butter, and then you guys can enjoy your butter, and yeah, we'll wrap this up. Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to talk about the science behind our butter. So hopefully you guys have your lovely butter product. Now remember, this can only last 2 to 3 days in the refrigerator, so use it up really quickly. But I hope you enjoy your delicious butter, and let's talk about the science behind this. So we talked a little bit about what makes milk milk, but let's talk about butter. So a lot of the foods we eat are created using chemistry. So butter is one of them. Butter is created from heavy whipping cream, and basically this heavy whipping cream, as we talked about before, is milk with a high fat content. So when cream is agitated or churned, so normally we'd say you churn butter, we shook ours, so we agitated it. And what happens is that the fat starts to glob together and separates itself from the liquid. At about the halfway point from being liquid cream to butter, as I said, we have our whipped cream. So if we keep going, that glob of fat gets firmer and firmer, and then that's when we have our butter and our buttermilk. So what is going on here? So the cream starts to thicken and our fat sticks together. So you might be asking, well, why doesn't, I've already got fat in my milk, what keeps the fat from sticking together all of the time? So a small amount of fat cells in the cream and milk are held together by a tight membrane. So when we're agitating that membrane, we end up breaking those membranes apart. So under normal conditions, these membranes keep the fat cells from grouping together because they're separated. But the second we burst those membranes with the agitation, they start bumping into each other, the membranes burst, and then the fat always wants to collect together. So this frees the fat cells to clump together and form larger clumps and cells, which makes our butter. So that's the difference. So the fat was already in the milk, we didn't add it. All we did was we broke down those cell membrane walls by shaking vigorously or churning, and that allowed the fat to group together. So I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the science behind butter and had fun shaking up your butter, and tune in next week for another Tinker Tuesday. All right, I will see you then.